The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Mary set out and traveled to the hill country in haste to a town of Judah, where she entered the house of Zechariah and greeted Elizabeth. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the infant leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth, filled with the Holy Spirit, cried out in a loud voice and said, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb. And how does this happen to me, that the mother of my Lord should come to me? For at the moment the sound of your greeting reached my ears, the infant in my womb leaped for joy. Blessed are you who believed that what was spoken to you by the Lord would be fulfilled." The Gospel of the Lord.
Well, we're all busy getting ready for Christmas this week, and this week I heard about a convent of nuns in New Zealand that were also getting ready for Christmas. And one of the sisters, Sister Elizabeth, was put in charge of the annual Christmas pageant. And she was all excited. She wanted to go all out. She was going to get a real baby to play the baby Jesus and real hay, and she was going to get real animals. And the other sisters said, "Well, Sister Elizabeth, that all sounds great in theory, but we live in New Zealand, and there are no native land mammals here in New Zealand. How are we going to get a donkey, say, for the stable, or anything that even looks like a donkey?" And Sister Elizabeth said, St. Joseph. St. Joseph got a donkey for Mary and Jesus. We'll pray to St. Joseph, and he'll get us a donkey. And so Sister Elizabeth had all the sisters draw a picture of a donkey and put it under their pillows at night. And that way, when they felt it under the pillow, they woke up in the morning, they would remember to pray for the donkey. Well, a few days before the Christmas pageant, sure enough, a farmer moved into the area, and he had a donkey of all things. Wonderful. And however, the only problem was this donkey didn't have a tail. It just kind of had a round, rump. And so Sister Elizabeth took her picture out from under her pillow, and the other sister took hers out. All the sisters took their pictures from under the pillows. Not one sister had remembered to draw a tail on the donkey. And so I guess the lesson is be specific when you pray. Be very careful what you're praying for. Well, the other night, Friday night, here at St. Michael's, we had our own living nativity of sorts. We call it Night in Bethlehem. And if you've never been, it's sort of a wonderful walk-through experience with games and music and crafts for the kids. We have all these characters dressed up. We have a real baby playing the baby Jesus. We have real hay. And we even have a petting zoo out in the parking lot. And we did have a donkey. And our donkey even had a tail. So that was wonderful. Well, what a wonderful way to enter into this last week before Christmas and remember that whole story of God's love, how he sent a baby into our world to remind us of his love. And when we think of the whole story of Jesus from his birth to his death, there's really only two characters that are there the entire time in Jesus' story. One is, of course, the Blessed Mother, who's there giving birth to him at the stable, who's there at the end, standing at the foot of the cross. But the other character who's there the entire story of Jesus is the donkey, because he's there in the stable warming the baby Jesus with his breath, and he's there on Palm Sunday bringing Jesus into the city to be crucified and to rise again for our salvation. He's there the entire time. And even in today's gospel, this story of the visitation, there's Mary and the donkey going to visit their cousin Elizabeth, Mary's cousin Elizabeth, down in the hill country of Judea. And that would have been about a 120-mile journey from Nazareth. So a donkey can travel on average about 10 miles a day. So it probably would have been about a 12-day journey for Mary riding on this donkey down to see Elizabeth. And she's in the early weeks of her pregnancy. She's probably battling morning sickness, fatigue, stress, being jostled about on this donkey the whole way. It was a physically demanding journey. It wasn't easy on Mary's body. But the flesh is weak, but the spirit is willing. And Mary was very willing to go through this because she wanted to go and visit her cousin Elizabeth and help her out. She did it out of love. And after a few months, Elizabeth has John the Baptist, and then it's a 12-day donkey ride for Mary back home to Nazareth. A few months later, she's going down to Bethlehem, another 12-day journey. Then she has to go to Egypt on a donkey all the way back. I am sure by the time that Jesus grew up, Mary never wanted to see a donkey again because just too much. But you know, in every nativity scene, it seems, there's the donkey, along with a lot of other characters, but the donkey is always there, it seems, in every nativity scene. We probably have St. Francis of Assisi to blame for that. St. Francis was actually the very first person to come up with the idea of a nativity scene that reminds us of the whole story of Christmas together. We find that story, details of the story in different places. St. Francis put it all together in this nativity scene that we get to see at Christmas time. And the first nativity that he set up, it was in a little village in Italy called Greccio in the 12th century, in a cave. It was a living nativity. It was like the one that the sisters had in New Zealand or our night in Bethlehem. It had a real baby and real characters and real hay and real animals. And St. Francis collected the two animals we see in almost every nativity scene today, the ox and the ass, to be there. And it's not surprising that it's St. Francis who's the one that came up with this idea, because St. Francis loved the things of God's creation. He loved to touch things and feel things, see things to remind him of God. St. Francis loved animals, and so it's not surprising he had the donkey there. And St. Francis so loved God's creation that he called everything by a familial name. He said, brother sun and sister moon, brother wind and sister water. And when it came to his own body, his own flesh, really the most important part of God's creation, St. Francis called his own body brother ass. Now, we can probably relate to that description sometimes because, especially as we get a little bit older or busier, our bodies don't always cooperate with what we want them to do. They are stubborn like a donkey, and yet they have to bring us around everywhere we go, jostling about everywhere. And yet our bodies are these incredible pieces of God's creation. As weak as they are, as tired as they can get sometimes, our bodies are miracles of God's creation. There are more than 800 billion more cells in your body than there are galaxies in the universe. If you stretched out all of your arteries and veins and capillaries, if you stretched them all out, they would go 60,000 miles from New Zealand and back many times. If your heart beats 101,000 times a day, blood through that system. And I think your brain might be the most incredible thing that God has ever created. And contrary to what many believe, there's probably never going to be a machine or a computer that can replicate what your brain does. It might be able to replicate certain functions, but your brain goes beyond anything than we could ever come up with, no matter how advanced our technology gets. And so your body is really an amazing thing. We are wonderfully, fearfully made, it says in the Bible. And in today's reading from the letter to the Hebrews, we read, "When Christ came into the world, he said, 'Sacrifice and offering I do not desire, but a body you have prepared for me.' Then he says, 'Behold, I come to do your will.'" Jesus came to teach us that what God desires is not all of those animal sacrifices that were offered up in the temple for centuries, offered up to God as a sacrifice in place of us. God doesn't want us to go out and collect all the land mammals and bring them to him. God doesn't need any more donkeys with tails or otherwise, because all the beasts of the field belong to him. No, what God desires is the greatest part of his creation. It's us. He desires us to offer up our own bodies as a living sacrifice to the Lord, giving our hearts, giving our wills. I desire to do your will. And when we use our bodies to do God's will, when we use our bodies for the glory of God, then we are offering great sacrifice and worship to God. A couple of weeks ago, I got an early Christmas present. The diocese called me up and said, we don't have a priest right now in Epping, at St. Joseph's in Epping. Father Don got transferred to New London. We don't have a priest to go there until after the new year. Would you mind being the temporary administrator there until we can find a new priest? And I said, sure, yeah, I have nothing else to do at Christmas time, no problem. I actually said, "Behold, I come to do your will, O Bishop," is what I said. But, I don't mind doing that because they don't have a priest right now, and some people say I should learn to say no more often, and I probably should. And it is increasingly difficult to drag Brother Ass here around with me to all my different jobs and towns I have to cover. But the flesh is weak, the spirit is willing. And we do those types of things sometimes out of love. And I think we all do that. All of us are doing that right now, especially at Christmas time. We do so much for our families. We do so much for the people that we love. We do so much for the people that we work with. And yes, it's because we say yes to too much sometimes, but it's also because we genuinely love the people in our life. We genuinely want to offer up our bodies as a living sacrifice to the Lord. And what Jesus reminds us by coming as the baby in Bethlehem is that our bodies are so important and so special to God. It was so special that God decided to take on our body himself, to come in the flesh. As weak as that flesh was, and Jesus got tired, Jesus got sick, Jesus ultimately died on the cross, and yet he did all of that because he loved us, and he wanted to be with us. He wanted to give us the God's love. And, all those people who for centuries were praying, Lord, come, we want to see you. Lord, let us see your face, and we shall be saved. God answered that prayer by sending a little baby in the manger of Bethlehem, and that little baby face looking up at us from the manger, that was the face of God that people had prayed to see. Thank goodness those people were so specific in what they prayed for.